Hi, and welcome back to the second part of a four-part series with the Sports Lawyers Association. My name is Aaron Hernandez. I'm the director of the Bud Selig Sports Law and Business Program at Arizona State University, and we are so happy to be joined today by the Director of Legal and Government Affairs for the Philadelphia Eagles, Marla Axelrod. Welcome, Marla.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Marla, today's session is titled Preparing for Your First Encounter at the SLA Conference. And we know we've got a bunch of law students who are doing their first SLA ever, and they're looking to hear some wonderful words of wisdom from you. So we appreciate you being here. And I guess my first question for you is, how did you get your really cool job that you're in right now? And what made you decide that you wanted to become a sports attorney?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think people end up becoming, sports law attorneys through a wide variety of paths. And mine, I never really intended to, didn't set out to become a lawyer who worked in sports. It kind of was a little bit of timing and luck and opportunity. So I was a summer associate at Aiken Gump. And when I was there, I worked on an assignment that was not related to sports. I worked with an attorney, and it was one of these like terrible 50-state survey research things. And I just sort of put my head down and did the work and, paid attention to details. And, we ended up having a good working relationship. And when I came back to the firm as a first-year attorney, I found out that she worked on some matters with another partner who had a relationship with the NFL. And so they kind of, put me into their orbit. And so I started working on some of the NFL matters along with other clients as well. And then, over the years sort of ramped up my knowledge of NFL related things and became more knowledgeable about the collective bargaining agreement and different labor and employment matters that sort of came up along the way. And so I was at Aiken Gump for about 10 years and did a lot of that. And during my time at Aiken Gump, went to the Sports Lawyers Association and networked with a lot of other people, and ended up, I started in Washington, D.C. and moved to Philadelphia. And I met the general counsel of the Eagles through those years of networking, which we'll talk about. And so, she was looking to hire another lawyer, and we started talking, and it sounded like it was a good fit. One thing led to another. And about 4 years ago, I went to the Eagles, where I kind of expanded from doing mostly labor and employment to now doing sort of anything and everything under the sun. So it was kind of an unexpected journey, but it's the journey that I went on, and it's been a good one.
Well, how cool. And Marla, backing up even further, what made you want to be an attorney in the first place?
That's a great question. When I was in college, I did an internship in New York, and it was relating to sort of like some child welfare issues, and it was not a legal internship at all. But I noticed that whenever there was a question that that really needed to be answered, that would be sort of like particularly important, they always took it upstairs to the law department. And I was kind of like, I'm going to be in the law department. I want to be the one who kind of can like answer those tough questions. So that was sort of what sparked my interest. And then over the years, I really like to read and write and argue. It just sort of something that came naturally to me.
That's funny you mentioned really like to argue. My mom always told me from a young age, oh, you're going to be an attorney. And I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or foresight or something else a little more nefarious. But she always mentions that I like to argue as well. So I'm okay with that, Marla. So as I mentioned, there's going to be a number of people who are attending their first SLA ever. And it's unfamiliar territory for them to begin with. And now it's even more unfamiliar territory in this weird virtual world. But a lot of people are networking for the first time, and they're preparing for their first encounter with some professionals like yourself in this industry. So tell me, what are some of the most important things that a law student should research about the professionals with whom they're wishing to speak with?
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. It's already sort of a challenging thing to network with other people, and the virtual, scenario that we find ourselves in makes it extra hard, I think. And I think, it's important if there's somebody that you're really interested in meeting, or an area of the law that you're particularly interested in, to at least do sort of some basic research, try to find their LinkedIn profiles, some bios, like obvious things, because what you don't want to do is say something that sort of just doesn't make any sense. So, if the person has like for me, like a labor and employment background, maybe you can figure that out. I wouldn't say like, oh, I really want to work on like stadium finance deals or something. Like, I don't know anything about that really. So, sort of understanding your audience and just sort of like basic high level things. I think other than that, no one expects you to know everything about their background. And in fact, that might be a little bit unsettling. So
That's a fair point. And so when these students are getting ready to meet a professional like yourselves or some of the other professionals at the conference, what are some things that they should do to prepare themselves? And one thing I particularly have in mind is, how should a student go about presenting themselves effectively to somebody who they don't know and they might be nervous to meet for the first time?
Sure. I think one of the most important things you can do is sort of know yourself, know what you're interested in. Everybody wants to do sports law. I mean, based on this conference. So when you say, oh, I'm really interested in sports law, like that doesn't really move the ball, So, is there something in particular that you're interested in learning more about, or you did some sort of internship where you learned about something that you think would be really cool to apply in the sports industry, or you are interested in learning more about how you got to your position or something like that. Have some sort of an angle, because just having the very basic, I'm interested in sports law, just like kind of it won't set anybody apart. It won't make you really particularly memorable.
Marla Axelrod, Director of Legal and Government Affairs for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's great advice, Marla. And what particularly resonates with me is everybody's here for a very similar reason, and you'll probably get buried pretty quickly in somebody's mind if you just say, I'm interested in being a sports lawyer. Yep, you're right. So is everybody else. So with that, how can a student stand out and make a good first impression with somebody like yourself who's going to be getting a lot of these inquiries all at once?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to also know your audience in addition to knowing yourself. So, if someone reaches out to me, most often they say, if they say, I'm interested in learning about how you, got to where you are and what you do, like most of the time, like I will try to make time and have a conversation with somebody. It's a reasonable request. I think there's a lot of people who are looking for opportunities like internships and things like that, which is also reasonable, but that's not something that I would necessarily be able to offer. We don't normally do that. So, kind of try to understand what's your angle with someone. Do you just want to have sort of like a connection session? Do you want to learn more about that person? Are you looking for an internship? Are you looking for them to connect you to someone else? I think it's important to sort of be reasonable with your expectations too. Setting up a phone conversation for, 20, 30 minutes is something that makes sense. I've had people reach out and then they put it on the calendar for an hour and they're like, that's not really going to work. So, sort of being reasonable in what you're asking for and what you're looking for, I think are important things. Another thing I would say is, everybody operates differently. So some people are very big into LinkedIn, and everybody they meet, they just want to connect with them because you never know going down the road how your paths might connect again. Other people are maybe a little bit more selective on who they want to be, connected with on LinkedIn. They want to have some knowledge of who that person is. So I personally don't think just a blanket LinkedIn, request is that effective. I think, maybe, oh, it was really nice meeting you at the Sports Lawyers Association conference. We spoke about X. Like a personalized message sometimes goes a long way into sort of like getting you into the person's, connection. So knowing that, or a personalized email. Some people write, snail mails, which I think again, know your audience. I'm not sure that's the most effective thing to do, particularly now when a lot of people are working remotely, but sometimes that does show that you're going the extra mile. So it's kind of like understanding the circumstances and what you think might work best in those particular circumstances.
Great advice. And, you mentioned respect of people's time and some of the other things you mentioned just made me think a lot of professionals really enjoy genuine connections. And we tell our students all the time, don't be a professional networker because we can spot you pretty quickly. And I remember from my time doing these conferences at the NCAA, somebody would come up and they'd have some pretty quick asks about how I could help get them an internship. And it was very clear that they were just working the room. And I was always a little bit more turned off by that. And the ones who I stayed friends with and I tried to help afterwards were folks who were just very genuine about getting to know me and very excited about the industry generally. And they knew that it was going to take some time to reach their goals. So with that in mind, do you have an anecdote in your mind of somebody who really knocked it out of the park and they were really successful, made a good impression, and you thought, gosh, that's something maybe I would do and I would bring to a cocktail setting or some type of conference setting in the future?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's really difficult given the circumstances that we're in, because the one that comes to mind, and I forget the exact circumstances, but it was back in the before times when you could meet people for, coffee or something like that. But it was somebody who had reached out and said, I live in Philadelphia and I work at a law firm, or I'm from Philadelphia. I live in New York. I work at a law firm. I do, whatever it is I do. I'm really interested in transitioning. I know that I see that your background is sort of similar to that. I'm going to be in the area. Like, I would love to meet up for coffee. And it was like, you never know what mood you're going to catch the person in. Like, sometimes you're in the middle of 1,000 things. And you're like, I'm not meeting somebody I don't know for coffee. And sometimes you're like, you know what? Why not? So I think I did end up meeting that person for coffee. And again, like, the ask was not, I want an internship with the Eagles. I want a job with the Eagles. It was just, I want to understand like how you got to where you got. And like we talked about before, I wasn't able to offer anything to this person from an immediate, perspective. But down the road, a position came open with another, team that I became aware of, and I forwarded along to this person, which, that might not have happened otherwise, because sometimes it's hard to, know what jobs are being posted or not posted, or word of mouth, or whatever the case may be. So again, I don't know if it was ultimately successful for that person, but by just sort of like being, inquisitive about things and sort of like understanding the audience and catching me on a good day, it kind of, I think it worked as intended as a good networking sort of example.
Well, that's great, Marla, and that's good karma for you as well. I'm glad that you took some time with them. So on the flip side, and I won't ask for anecdotal information on this one, but on the flip side, what are some common pitfalls that you have seen students make when they try to make a good first impression?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, I think, again, being reasonable, knowing your audience, knowing yourself. When I ask, like, what are you interested in? What do you like? Because when people say, oh, I want to do sports law, it's like, well, sports law encompasses a lot of different things. There's got to be, at least like 1 or 2 or 3 areas that interest you more than others. Somebody once said to me, I'd like to be the general manager for the Eagles. And I was like, well, that's not really going to happen at this point in time. Like, what do you think? What can I help you with, like, to understand? So, I think, you need to like have a sense of time and place, and where you are in time and space, and again, reasonable with expectations and open to learning, and not necessarily like thinking you're going to sort of leapfrog ahead to a position that you're maybe not quite ready for.
What I had happen one time, I was always at Big 12 football games. They were my main client while I was at the NCAA, and a student who was meeting me for the first time at a networking event said, hey, I'd love to get together with you. Maybe we could talk at a football game. And I thought, oh, he must be at a Big 12 school, and maybe he thinks I'm going there. No, he wanted me to get him access to the football game. I was like, oh man, that's needless to say, it didn't work out long term. So hopefully nobody's ever asked you for like tickets or access or anything like that. And if it's not obvious to everybody on the video, please don't do that. That's a quick way to networking jail, if you will. So finally, Marla, there's going to be a lot of great folks who are at this conference trying to make a good impression. They're watching these videos in preparation for their first conference. They're going to be sports lawyers one day. And you're occupying the seat. You're occupying the seat that they want to get to. And so they look up to you and they're getting ready to muster up some courage to talk to you. And it's in a virtual setting now. So they're trying to arrange it in a different way. What are some pieces of advice that you have for students who are dealing with a lot of jitters and nervousness as they meet somebody who they idolize and they want to be when they grow up?
I mean, I think, we're not any different than anybody else. We're just, we're doing a job. It sounds cool, but it's a job where you have to sort of, to me, what I always say to people is like, figure out how you can be value add. Like no one cares that you want to work in sports. I might care that you have a background doing, X, or that you had an internship that makes it sound like you could really be, helpful to our organization or another organization I know is looking for, another attorney. Or, you're a really good writer and you sent me an email that, didn't have typos in it. Those are things I look for. So, I think, but like I said before, I'm usually very open to having a conversation with someone because I'm really, like I said, I got to my position, a little bit of, timing, circumstances, good luck, doing good work, but it all kind of factors in together. So there's nothing that's special about, me or the position that I'm in or any of these other people other than they have cool jobs and, it's something that, you can aspire to. But I think just talking to people, being, just a regular old human being who can make connections and have a conversation goes a really long way.
Marla, this has been wonderful. Last question for you. Any parting advice you have for all these young future sports lawyers as they get ready for their first SLA conference?
Yeah, I think just learn as much as you can about the people who you are interested in and the areas of the law that you're interested in. The cool thing about sports law is there really is no such thing as sports law. It's just the law applied to the sports industry. So, there's room for everybody. If you're interested in, transactional work, litigation, labor and employment, IP, data privacy, you name it, there's something that you can kind of get interested in. So, but having some sort of angle, something that you're interested in, other than just the plain old, like I'm interested in sports law, I think is really helpful when you go into sort of a conference that has this many topics and this many people involved.
All great advice. Marla Axelrod, Director of Legal and Government Affairs for the Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you so much, Marla, for helping young people prepare for their first encounter at the SLA conference.
Of course. Hope that was helpful.
So thanks again to Marla for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here on the second part of this 4-part series with the Sports Lawyers Association. We will be back with part 3. We'll be joined by Lee Hawley, and we'll be discussing virtual networking in our next episode. And until then, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining the Sports Lawyers Association.